I just saw two video game adaptations, one very good and one very, very bad. So let's talk about the bad one first. That, of course, being Uncharted. Boy oh boy was this movie disappointing. At the very least, I was expecting a fun Indiana Jones like action adventure movie, but what I got was something not even resembling that. It was trying to resemble a superhero movie, I think, because all the action was extremely fake. And this coming from a video game franchise where all the action is very real, very brutal, and very raw. All the action in this movie feels like it's from Spider-Man, and even Spider-Man has more brutal scenes. It's like Indiana Jones, but made for babies. Where's the grime? Where's the dirt? Throughout the entire film, everyone is extremely clean. If you remember back to Indiana Jones, there are multiple scenes where Indiana Jones is extremely dirty. He is bleeding all the time. He is always hurt. The action in those movies are extremely realistic because they wanted Indiana Jones to be a normal person just going through these globetrotting adventures. The Uncharted games are pretty much the same thing, except it's not Indiana Jones going to these adventures, it's Nathan Drake. You're essentially playing as Nathan Drake going through these adventures, and along the way, he gets extremely hurt. He gets extremely brutalized. I don't think there's a single moment in this movie where Tom Holland or Nathan Drake, even though he didn't really feel like Nathan Drake, but we'll get to that. There wasn't a moment where he got shot, where he broke any bones. He was okay throughout most of the movie. Even with the extremely corny action set pieces like the plane scene and the boat scene, those were very fun. Those were the most fun parts of the movie, but at the same time, they felt very fake. The huge benefit of Uncharted being a video game is that they can have a lot of over-the-top action scenes. They can have it as unrealistic and fake as they want it because it's a video game. Your suspension of disbelief is greatly heightened because you know it's not real, but it feels real when it's a video game. You feel like you're part of the action when you're playing as Nathan Drake. You feel less in the action when you're watching Tom Holland do flips and tricks. I have to talk about this. Tom Holland is extremely miscast as Nathan Drake. I don't know whose decision it was to cast him as Nathan Drake. Probably some executive from Sony being like, hey, Tom Holland, he's a pretty big actor who's mostly known as Spider-Man. He's Spider-Man. He's made $1 billion. So let's make him Nathan Drake. Because why not? Because we are greedy. This sole casting choice was a total distraction throughout the entire movie because Nathan Drake is a handsome 30-year-old man who is suave and who is handsome. I said that already. Who is extremely cocky and snarky and would disobey orders if he could. He's essentially if Aladdin was the globe-trotting action hero instead of Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones is more of a chill, smart archaeologist, and that works for his character because that's who he is. Both of these characters have distinct personalities, and I would argue that Tom Holland's Nathan Drake just feels like he's doing Spider-Man again. It doesn't feel like a different character or the same character as Nathan Drake in the video game. And I know Tom Holland is a handsome man and Nathan Drake is also a handsome man, but Tom Holland has a baby face. He still looks like a teenager or a young adult when his character is supposed to be in his 30s. I believe so. He never felt like Nathan Drake. He felt more like baby Drake, down to his mannerisms. There are multiple parts of this movie where Tom Holland would hurt somebody and say sorry. Nathan Drake, or at least the video game version of Nathan Drake, not this baby Drake, would have constantly made quirky comments throughout the entire movie.
You have something I want, and you're going to give it to me.
Really? Well, I'm flattered, but I'm afraid I'm spoken for. Excuse me.
I don't think Tom Holland made an entire quirky comment in this movie. So he wasn't Nathan Drake, he was Baby Drake. He couldn't even make any snarky or witty comments throughout the entire movie. That was all in favor of Marky Mark, the person who plays Sully in this movie, and another person who I believe is extremely miscasted. Mark Wahlberg's performance was so bad that it reminded me of his 2008 performance from The Happening. There was even a scene where he was giving a long, meaningful speech to Tom Holland, and it sounded exactly like the cough syrup scene from The Happening.
There was a really good-looking pharmacist behind the counter. Really good-looking. I went up and I asked where the cough syrup was. I didn't even have a cough.
Mark Wahlberg was extremely bad in this movie, and he was given most of the witty dialogue, and mind you, he delivered them very, very terribly. Again, this is his Happening performance. At the very least, you would have expected them to have chemistry with each other, but they don't. They were very chemistry-less, which is a surprise to me because Sully and Nathan are probably one of the best relationships in all of video games. Nathan would always be the one that gets in trouble, and Sully would always be the one that looks out for him. The relationship in this movie, it was hard to believe that Marky Mark would ever help Baby Drake. You'd always feel that Marky Mark is up to no good no matter what, and Tom Holland is the good boy that'll always not get in trouble. I don't know, that's how I interpret it in the movie. Their relationship was not very good. As for everybody else in the movie, I guess Antonio Banderas was fine. I don't remember what his character was or what his motivation was. I just know he was the bad guy, and there was a girl bad guy, and there was another girl named Chloe who's from the second or third game. I don't know. This movie didn't work for me like at all. I would rather watch the Indiana Jones movies over this any day. I've already forgotten most of what the plot was. Nathan Drake has a brother that isn't even brought up until the fourth game because that was like a twist thing that they did for the fourth game. But let's just put in this movie because fan service, I guess. Yeah, don't go see this one. It's slowly depleting from my mind the longer I talk about it. So I give this movie a 2 out of 10 because it had 2 fun action scenes, and that's it.
We're looking for fun.
Well, that's enough of that, I guess. Let's move on to something good. Something I think is great, actually. Something that's getting way too much harsh criticism, in my opinion. Let's talk about the Cuphead Show. Or Cuphead. It's called the Cuphead Show. Let's talk about that. The Cuphead Show has come out recently, and I gotta say, I like it more than most people, I think. It's definitely better than Uncharted in terms of adapting a video game. Uncharted still felt like a studio trying to understand what made the game good in the first place, or trying to make the game more marketable to a higher audience. Casting Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg was a big testament to that. But the casting in Cuphead, the only big name in it is Wayne Brady, and he's probably only in it for 1 episode as King Dice. Okay, sure, this show isn't perfect or anything, but it's leagues better than anything that a movie adaptation or any sort of adaptation could do. The Cuphead game was pretty much a love letter to 1940s cartoons, and so the show follows in that footstep in being kind of like a 1940s cartoon, but also playing it to a more modern crowd that love absurd shows, that love absurd cartoons like SpongeBob and everything. There's a lot of humor that is reminiscent of SpongeBob or shows like that. This sort of cartoon style kind of works with Cuphead because it is such a absurd world that they can do anything with. They have so much unique and weird characters that of course the humor is going to be weird. That's just going to be a given for a Cuphead show. In short, they took the material and they made an entertaining thing out of it. They made their own unique, weird show, and it completely works because each episode is essentially a story that they made up, like a wacky scenario that the character of Cuphead and Mugman get themselves into. Each of the episodes is like Cuphead have to solve a thing. It's very self-contained the way the show is written. You can watch an episode of Cuphead and be satisfied with it. You don't have to like binge it like, I don't know, Arcane. No, not that I don't like Arcane. I really love Arcane. I'm gonna clear that up. But this sort of episodic storytelling is kind of rare in Netflix shows, kids Netflix shows too, where you have to start from the beginning to get the entire lore. You can probably watch some of the episodes of Cuphead in like random order and probably not be lost. Unlike Uncharted, where all the characters were pretty much unmemorable, I can't remember a single character's name other than Baby Drake and Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg. I forgot most of the other characters' names or what their purpose of the movie was. Enough of Uncharted. But the characters in Cuphead are very charming. They're very likable. Even though I don't know if they 100% resemble the characters from the game. It's been a while since I've seen the game. All the characters, in my opinion, are very, very charming, likable. They have a lot of wits. They have a lot of sass to them. I'm talking mainly like the villains of the show. The devil is probably one of my favorite characters in the show, which is weird because he's the devil. He's like a sassy and he's just evil. He loves to be evil, but Cuphead's like one of the main annoyances in his life. There's an ongoing gag throughout most of the show where the devil's trying to get his soul, which escalates, and it actually kind of builds the world, strangely enough. I think I laughed more in this show than in Uncharted. Not that Uncharted needed to be a comedy or anything. Being animated, a lot of the jokes are allowed to be as absurd as they wanted to. Regardless of how you would feel about the show, you cannot deny that they took a lot of time and a lot of effort to match the feel of watching a 1940s cartoon. They even had some of the film grain that was not as harsh as the game, but it's still there. I don't know if people think they half-assed it. I don't think they did. I think they did a lot of effort. More effort than the Uncharted movie. There's just too much positive aspects of the show that I just absolutely love. It's extremely quotable too. I remember the argument scenes of the frogs. The bigger frog brother is like, "You're blaming me for blah blah blah," and then the smaller frog is like, "So what if I am?" And then they fight. That's literally all their argument scenes, and it's always funny. Overall, I would probably recommend the Cuphead Show as its own thing. Separating it from the game too probably would help. The game has lore, and the show is sort of building on that lore by incorporating these wacky, generic episodes. Yeah, it just has a lot going for it, and I absolutely love it. I would probably rate it a 9 out of 10. It's not perfect. I really wanted to see more, which is probably why it's not perfect. I wanted to see a season 2 where they add more of the characters from the game. They don't incorporate all of them, of course, because it's just season 1. But the fact that I'm looking forward to another season just goes to show how much I'm passionate and loving the show. Yeah, as for the Uncharted movie, I'm not really looking forward to a sequel. You know what they should do instead? There was a 2018 short film with none other than Nathan Fillion. You know, Nathan Fillion, the guy that has been in all of James Gunn's movies, a main character in Firefly. You know, the guy that should have played Nathan Drake the entire time. Anyways, there's an Uncharted short film in 2018 where Nathan Fillion plays Nathan Drake, and it's pretty fantastic. Not fantastic, but pretty great. It portrays a better version of Nathan Drake than, well, Baby Drake. I advise everyone to watch this short film because it accurately portrays what the games feel like. Although it's missing the treasure hunting aspect, they're not in any tombs, they're like in a house. It still has that feel of the video game. It has a lot of grime. Nathan Drake is dirty, he's like bloody. There's very, very brutal action in it. Nathan Drake actually makes witty and funny comments.
Jesus! What are they feeding you?
Again, although it's not perfect, it's leagues better at respecting and adapting the source material very, very well. Now, the only problem is that it's like 14 minutes. It's not long enough to garner like a feature-length movie. But if we could make like a project, an Uncharted project with Nathan Fillion of any sort, it could be a TV show and with the same tone as the short film. I think it could be this other Uncharted project that probably won't happen because Sony wants Tom Holland. Honestly, if we had that, I think we could have gotten a not just good, a great Uncharted movie that faithfully adapts the game. Sadly, we got one of my least favorite films as of this year. In short, Cuphead is the perfect way to adapt a video game respectfully, and Uncharted the movie is a way to completely disrespect a source material and try to appeal to a bigger crowd and disrespecting what made the game great in the first place. This should probably be a lesson learned in studios trying to adapt video games. Respect the games first and then try to make a movie out of it. Cuphead, Arcane, even The Witcher, which is okay. Those are like TV shows that are made in respect of people that love the game, but also pave way to people that aren't familiar with it and will give you a familiar feeling of what that game feels like. We should fix this video game adaptation mess as soon as possible. I don't want another Uncharted that's Tommy Holland. I think that's it.